I made a bet Jesus could be the odds. He can shine through me cause I'm the son of God. Don't feel nobody, I'm rockin' feel God. Can't rob with two cause I ain't feeling God. I made a bet Jesus could be the odds. He can shine through me cause I'm the son of God.
Yo, welcome again to the Question Mindset Podcast with your host, Olivier J. Darcis. Yeah, I already know what the vision and mission is, to help provide deep understanding on topics, questions, and through conversations that we have to help you be a better believer in Christ, carry yourself in life, and everything. I just want to get through the intro, man, because today I've been really thinking about something. And as I meditate on these topics, these questions, these episodes, what God wants me to talk about, where is He leading me on this next episode that I do, the number one thing that's been popping up, that's been a repeating thing, was the fact that people have a tendency or will have a tendency to label what I'm doing as preaching, because I shift the vision and mission to something to something that's Christ-centered and, putting God first before everything. And that's one of the things that I want to avoid, and I've been wanting to avoid, because the reason why I do this, it's not to be classified under a labeled like preaching, teaching, ministering, leading, whatever the case may be, even though I know you have to categorize things. But it's none of that. At the end of the day, on this journey that I am, in this journey that I'm going through with God, I just been loving the wisdom of God. Like, if I could put love next to the word wisdom, and I just been loving God's wisdom, God's revelation, God's understanding, how God blesses people with wisdom. Mesmerized and in awe of the wisdom that Solomon carried and the wisdom Jesus carried. I just been loving all these things, and I'm just doing this to share what I learn and share the things that I need to meditate on and focus on, you name it. Because at the end of the day, it's the experience that I have with God. And we each have our own experiences with God. And this is just one thing that I just love when I experience God. Like God's wisdom gets me going. God's wisdom gets me going whenever my prophet at my church at the Worldwide Kingdom Ministry is speaking God's wisdom, God's revelation. I just been loved. Like, I'm at the edge of my seat each time. And realizing this in my journey with God, I've been looking at my life sometimes. And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because as I've been moving, I realized that things like this, the labels and the things people try to put on you, like that, I realized that one of these, that particular thing or things like this are put to distract you in life. Because whenever I think about that, as I'm meditating, it gets me turned off to want to write a topic or to stray away from certain topics, because I'll be considered preaching or whatever label you want to put on me, even though it's not about the labels. And I realized that's a big distraction, and there's many roots to distractions, and that's what I wanted to talk about, the different roots to distractions. Like, when I think about what a root is, I believe I wrote it down. A root is the basic cause or source or the origin of something. And that's why I said the root of distractions, because there's many roots of distraction. The first one being spending time or enjoying the things that's outside of God's presence. that's the first root. That's the first root to distraction, because I was looking at my life. Like I said earlier, I've been enjoying playing video games too much. I've been enjoying scrolling on social media, and sometimes it can be too much where I'm too sucked in. And I'm sure you guys experience that too, especially with social media, where you're just scrolling, laughing, enjoying the time. But all that was outside of God's presence. I didn't realize that it was outside of God's presence because I'm not keeping his business at the forefront of my mind. Because I'm not saying those things are bad to do, like enjoying downtime, playing video games, watching TV, whatever the case may be. And there's a key word as to why I'm saying that, and saying that spending time outside of God's presence is a root of distraction, is a root and a root of distraction, because nothing turns to a root instantaneously. It takes constant watering of a seed for it to develop roots and turn into a root of something, because each seed has an identity. And sometimes you won't know a seed's identity until it turns into a root and until it starts growing. Look at the Bible, when the Bible tells you a story on people planting crops, and it wasn't until the crops started growing that it developed roots, and they noticed that, hey, weeds are growing amongst the grain. And how when that happens, sometimes it's hard for you to tear out that root, because if you tear out that root, you probably will be tearing out some of the grain, some of the wheat, some of the produce, some of the seeds of fruits, of good fruits that God puts into your life. And it's very clear that you either block it out before it gets planted inside, or realize the separation between the two. And when it's time to separate those things of your life, you know what to separate. Because many times, for example, you could be doing something. It might not be considered sin. It might not be, and it might not be considered something that causes you to fall into sin, right? But over time, as you continue to water, as you continue to do that particular thing, it causes you to then become separated from God, because it was either outside of God's presence, or it causes you to forget God, or it causes you to look away from God. And that happens because you've been spending so much time in that gray area as it's been developing, as it's been growing, that eventually is going to cause you to fall into sin and cut you off from God's presence. That's why you have to realize everything that you do, and in anything that you do, just make sure you put God's presence in it. You say, God, I remember you. I remember the will you have for your life. Right now, I'm just enjoying that. And that's what works for me. Like, God, I'm enjoying some downtime. This is going to help me just to reset myself so I can continue the mission. I can continue the vision. I can continue walking in the vision. I can continue to do the things that you called me to do. I'm not overly basking. I'm not basking in pleasures overly. It's just downtime. That's one of the things that worked for me. That's been working for me, as I realize, because sometimes I don't realize the things that I'm enjoying too much in God's presence. That's outside of God's presence, and I just have to realign myself and just keep that at the forefront. And out of one of the many roots, that being one of them, another root that I feel like weighs just as much as the root of enjoying the things that's outside of God's presence is people. People can be a major factor as far as whether you stay on the will God has for you or you don't, whether you become something in life or you don't, whether you stay focused on something or you just go out in the world and goof off. Because, like, once again, looking at my life, because I rather use myself as an example so you guys can understand and do the same for yourself. Because growing up, like, this is the first reason why people have a tendency to label things or just to distract you because of their words. I'm not going to get into other things yet, but their words. Like, growing up, I was the way that I was because of people's words, how it affected my mind, my emotions, the way I thought about myself. Everything. It caused me to have a stutter. It caused me to do all these things for the sake, because people didn't know what they were saying that could really affect you and your life and the destiny that God has for you, or they were intentionally trying to knock you off of that path because of jealousy or whatever the reason was. That's the first one, words. And for you to get over that, you have to understand what God has for you and the words God tells you and the prophecies he gives to you, because that was one of the main reasons why I broke free from that. Because yes, I started to read the Bible more. And of course, I was learning things from mentors that helped me break out of certain things. But it was really when God started to prophesy and speak to me, and I realized that God gave me ammo. Point blank, God gave me ammo. Like, one of them being, you shall not walk in the spirit of in the fear, but walk in the sound mind, peace, and love. Like, those things are ammo, and those things God declares over your life. So why should people's words rebuke that? Why should people's words rebuke what God says he blessed you with? Like, that's why people's words, people and their words can distract you. And that's one of the roots that can really kill you in life. Like, their words is one thing, but just the next thing is their nature. If you're around certain people all the time, it's a matter of time before you either walk into what they're going to, or it's a matter of time before you walk into what they are, or a portion of you walks into what they are, because you're made up of a certain percentage of people around you. So if one person walks like this, there's going to be times where in some scenarios you walk like that, whether it's anger, whether it's rage, whether they're cursing, whether they're this, whether they're that. Just a part of you is going to emulate that nature of that person just ever so slightly. That's why it's key that you surround yourself with people. And I said this on a couple of episodes, and I said this with guests. You surround yourself with people that embody who you want to be, who you are trying to be, and where you are on your journey in becoming that person. Nobody's perfect, but if you surround yourself with people who are trying to be better, then that is what you will become, and that is a journey that you'll be on. If you don't, who's to say you won't slip up and curse? Or even what I've been seeing in myself, I've been saying alternatives to curse words like frick, all these types of things. And as I'm saying these things, and I'm realizing, like, yo, I'm around people that curses a lot, and I don't want to curse. I don't want to say that perverse word, but then I say alternative, which is, and how far off is that alternative? People automatically know what you say if you say the alternative. So why is that even in my vocabulary? Like, I've been realizing all these things, all because that root of people can cause you and distract you and it can cause you to plant bad seeds in your life. It can cause, because if I'm saying these things because of the people around me, how much more would I do? How much more would I do? Like, you just got to realize that the two roots, people and the avenues from people, their words, their nature, is a root of distraction. whether those people are an example of who you are trying to become, an example of people who are on the journey of who you are trying to become. If it's anything else, it's a distraction to your life and what God and who God called you to be. And then, of course, the first one, if you're enjoying things outside of God's presence, you're not going to be in the presence that, like, if you enjoy the things that's outside of God's presence, you won't be the person God calls you to be, because that person is in God's presence. If you're outside of God's presence, then every piece of you is outside of God's presence. The will you are shooting and striving for, all the goals, everything is outside of God's presence, because that's not God. That's not who God called you to be, because who God called you to be it's within him. A portion of it is within him, a reflection of who he is in everything. So you need to realize and focus and lock down and know how to tell a good root from a bad root, because when it's time, when it counts, when it's time for you to separate it, you know what to separate, and you're not throwing away a good tree or a good fruit. And you want to make sure you're not keeping a bad tree and bad fruits. At the end of the day, it lies between those two roots. There's more roots to it, but those are the main roots that's been speaking to my heart, and is one of the things that I wanted and needed to share with you. At the end of the day, my name is Olivier J. Darcisse, helping you do the do to do life well and do it with God at the end of the day. Peace.